A 7-year-old paralyzed orphan girl asks to play the violin for leftovers, but they laugh at her, not knowing she's a violin prodigy. What happens next will break your heart. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more emotional stories. The bitter December wind cut through Boston's financial district as 7-year-old Lily Morgan struggled to balance on her crutches. Her small frame shivered beneath a coat 2 sizes too large, a hand-me-down from the orphanage's donation bin. Outside the gleaming glass entrance of Blackwell Tower, a group of well-dressed businessmen laughed as they exited, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Please, sir," Lily called out, her voice barely audible over the rush of traffic. "Could I play a song for your supper leftovers?" Her stomach had been growling since morning. "Mrs. Peterson at the orphanage did her best, but there were too many children and not enough food to go around. Lily had snuck out, violin case awkwardly strapped to her back, determined to earn something to eat. Richard Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Investments, turned toward the small voice. His expensive Italian shoes stopped abruptly on the sidewalk. At 53, he had built an empire by seeing opportunities others missed, but today all he saw was an inconvenience. "Thomas, do we have street performers now?" Richard laughed, nodding toward Lily. "And children, no less." Thomas Jenkins, his VP of Operations, chuckled. "Seems desperate times call for desperate measures." Lily wobbled slightly, the weight of the violin case throwing off her already precarious balance. One of her crutches slipped on a patch of ice, sending her tumbling onto the cold concrete. The case clattered beside her, and tears sprang to her eyes. Not from pain, but from humiliation. The men's laughter grew louder. "Well, at least she's providing entertainment," one called out. Richard stepped closer, an amused smirk playing on his lips. His dinner meeting had gone well, and he felt generous in his victory. Pulling a $20 bill from his wallet, he dangled it above Lily. "Tell you what, little girl, you say you can play? If you can play better than my friend Thomas here, who studied at Juilliard, you'll never go hungry again." His friends laughed at what was clearly an impossible challenge. Thomas hadn't actually studied at Juilliard. He'd taken a few violin lessons as a child, but the jest seemed harmless enough. Lily looked up, her blue eyes suddenly fierce through her tears. Without a word, she reached for her case, unlatched it with practiced fingers, and removed a battered violin. It had been her only friend for 3 years, discovered in the orphanage's forgotten storage room. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'll take that challenge." Something in her determination silenced the men. Lily positioned the violin under her chin while balancing precariously on one crutch. For a moment, Richard felt a twinge of guilt at mocking a disabled child. Then, Lily began to play. The first notes of Vivaldi's Winter floated through the cold air, crystalline and perfect. Pedestrians stopped in their tracks. The businessman's smiles faded. Richard's hand, still holding the $20 bill, slowly lowered to his side. Lily's eyes closed as her small fingers danced across the strings with impossible dexterity. The haunting melody soared above the street noise, transforming the mundane corner into something sacred. A crowd began to gather. A woman openly wept. Richard Blackwell stood transfixed, his cynical heart cracking open note by note. When the final chord faded into silence, Lily opened her eyes. The street remained hushed, as if awakening from a collective dream. Then applause erupted, thunderous, spontaneous. Richard found himself clapping harder than anyone, the $20 bill forgotten on the ground. Through the crowd pushed a slender woman in her 30s. "Young lady," she said, kneeling before Lily, "my name is Dr. Sarah Williams. I'm a music therapist at Boston Children's Hospital. Where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Before Lily could answer, Mrs. Peterson appeared, face flushed with worry and anger. "Lily Morgan, we've been searching everywhere for you." The caretaker grabbed Lily's arm, but Richard stepped forward. "Wait," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. This child has an extraordinary gift. As Lily looked up at the now serious faces surrounding her, she had no idea that this moment would change her life forever. Mrs. Peterson's grip loosened on Lily's arm as she assessed the gathering crowd. Her perpetually exhausted face registered confusion at the scene, Boston's elite standing in reverent silence before her most troublesome charge. "I'm sorry, but who are you people?" she asked, protective instinct flaring. At 48, Eleanor Peterson had spent 20 years watching orphaned children come and go, their hopeful faces gradually hardening with each passing year. She'd learned to be wary of sudden interest in her charges, especially the vulnerable ones like Lily. Richard Blackwell extended his hand. Richard Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Investments. His usual authoritative introduction lacked its customary arrogance. "Your Lily, is it? She's just performed one of the most extraordinary pieces of violin music I've ever heard." "Violin?" Mrs. Peterson's eyes darted to the instrument still clutched in Lily's small hands. "Where did you get that, young lady?" Lily's voice was barely audible. "From the storage room, 3 years ago. Nobody wanted it." "3 years?" Dr. Williams interjected. "You've only been playing for 3 years." Lily nodded, her eyes fixed on the ground. "I watch videos on the library computer, and I practice when everyone's asleep." Richard knelt down, surprising himself with the gesture. His $3,000 suit made contact with the dirty sidewalk, but for once, he didn't care. "Lily, who taught you to play?" "Nobody, sir." Her voice strengthened slightly. "The violin, it speaks to me. I just listen and do what it tells my fingers." The adults exchanged glances of disbelief. "Mrs. Peterson," Richard said, standing again, "I'd like to speak with you privately about Lily's future. I have some ideas that might benefit her." 15 minutes later, inside the warm lobby of Blackwell Tower, Mrs. Peterson sat rigidly in a leather chair, suspicious of Richard's intentions. "I want to sponsor Lily's musical education," he stated plainly. "Cover all costs. Proper medical care for her condition too." "Why?" Mrs. Peterson challenged. "You don't strike me as the charitable type, Mr. Blackwell." Richard's gaze drifted to where Lily sat at a grand piano in the lobby's corner, her fingers tentatively exploring the keys as Dr. Williams watched in amazement. "I'm not," he admitted. "But I know value when I see it. That child has a gift that comes along once in a generation. It would be criminal to let it wither in an underfunded orphanage, no offense." "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Mrs. Peterson had seen too many children used as props in wealthy people's charity narratives. Richard considered this. "Let's say I'm investing in potential. With the right training, Lily could become one of the great violinists of our time." Later that evening, as Lily lay in her narrow bed at the orphanage, the day's events seemed dreamlike. Emma Carter, her 11-year-old protector in the orphanage hierarchy, sat at the foot of her bed. "Is it true?" Emma whispered. "You're getting a special music teacher?" Lily nodded, still dazed. "Mr. Blackwell called him. His name is Mr. Reynolds. He teaches at some important school." Emma's face fell slightly. "You'll leave us soon, then? The talented ones always get adopted." "I won't leave you," Lily promised fiercely. "We're family." But as she drifted to sleep, Lily's mind filled with the melody she'd played on the street corner. For the first time, her music had been heard, really heard. The feeling was more satisfying than any meal could have been. Across town, Richard Blackwell sat in his penthouse, phone to his ear. "Michael, it's Richard. I need a favor. There's this child prodigy I discovered today. Yes, I know how it sounds, but trust me, you need to hear her play." Richard gazed out at Boston's skyline, remembering the pure, transcendent notes that had somehow thawed something long frozen within him. "She plays like her life depends on it," he added softly, "because I think it does." Michael Reynolds arrived at the orphanage precisely at 10 a.m. the following Saturday, his reputation preceding him. At 62, he had taught some of the world's finest violinists and had long ago lost patience for what he called proud parent syndrome, the mistaken belief that a child's mediocre musical ability was exceptional. He had agreed to this meeting only because Richard Blackwell had made a substantial donation to the conservatory where Michael taught. Obligation, not interest, brought him to the run-down brick building in Boston's less fortunate district. "Mr. Reynolds," Mrs. Peterson greeted him at the door. "Thank you for coming. Lily's waiting in our activity room. It's not much, but it has decent acoustics." Michael nodded curtly, following her through dim hallways that smelled of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. Children peeked from doorways as they passed, curious about the distinguished visitor with silver hair and immaculate posture. The activity room contained mismatched furniture, a scarred ping-pong table, and a small upright piano that hadn't been tuned in decades. In the center stood Lily, balanced on her crutches, violin already in position. "Hello, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm ready when you are." Michael raised an eyebrow, assessing the tiny figure before him. Her clothes were clean but well worn, her honey-brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Nothing about her suggested extraordinary talent. "Lily, is it? What will you play for me today?" His tone was professional, neither warm nor cold. "Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor," she replied. Michael couldn't hide his surprise. "That's a challenging piece for conservatory students, let alone a child your age." Lily simply nodded and began to play. Within seconds, Michael's expression transformed from polite interest to stunned disbelief. He sank onto the nearest chair, transfixed by what he was hearing. Lily played with technical precision that should have been impossible for her small hands. But it wasn't just technical skill that astonished him. She played with emotion and interpretation that spoke of life experience far beyond her 7 years, as if the violin was channeling decades of joy and suffering through her tiny body. When she finished, Michael remained silent for several moments. "Where did you learn that interpretation?" he finally asked. "Who taught you those phrasings?" "But nobody taught me," Lily answered. "The music tells me how it wants to be played." Michael turned to Mrs. Peterson. "I need to speak with whoever is handling her case, immediately." By that afternoon, plans were set in motion. Michael would teach Lily privately 3 times a week. Richard Blackwell would finance everything: lessons, a proper violin, medical consultations for her paralysis, even new clothing. "There's something else," Michael said during a conference call with Richard and Mrs. Peterson. "Lily needs stability, a permanent home environment conducive to her development. The adoption process takes time," Mrs. Peterson cautioned, "and Lily's medical needs make placement challenging." Richard cleared his throat. "What if I became her legal guardian temporarily? I have more than enough space, and I can hire whatever help she needs." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. "Mr. Blackwell, Mrs. Peterson finally said, "Forgiveness for being blunt, but you struck me as someone more interested in investments than children. Are you sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything," Richard admitted. "But I keep hearing her play in my mind. It's awakened something I thought was long dead." 2 weeks later, Lily stood in the massive foyer of Richard Blackwell's penthouse apartment, her few belongings in a small suitcase beside her. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Boston that made her dizzy. "This will be your home for now," Richard explained awkwardly. "Your room is down the hall. I had it, prepared for you." Lily nodded solemnly, overwhelmed by the rapid changes. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell." "You can call me Richard," he offered, then added hastily, "if you want." That night, Lily lay awake in a bed larger than her entire corner of the orphanage dormitory. The sheets were softer than anything she'd ever felt, the silence deeper than she'd known possible. She missed Emma's whispered stories and the comforting sounds of other children breathing in sleep. Here, she felt adrift in luxury, untethered from everything familiar. Clutching her violin case to her chest, Lily finally allowed herself to cry for her parents, lost in the same accident that had taken her ability to walk, for the orphanage that, despite its hardships, had been her only home, and for the uncertain future that stretched before her. "I don't belong here," she whispered to her violin. "But I'll play. I'll play until I find where I do belong." The first month at Richard's penthouse passed in a blur of adjustments. Lily's days now followed a carefully orchestrated schedule. Physical therapy in the mornings, general education with a private tutor at midday, and violin lessons with Michael Reynolds 3 afternoons a week. Richard remained an enigma to her. He left early each morning for work and returned late, often after she was asleep. Their interactions were brief, polite, but tinged with mutual uncertainty. He seemed both fascinated by her talent and utterly baffled by the presence of a child in his meticulously ordered world. On a rainy Tuesday evening in January, Richard arrived home earlier than usual. He found Lily in the living room, practicing a particularly difficult passage from Tchaikovsky. "You're still at it?" he asked, checking his watch. "It's nearly 9 o'clock. Lily lowered her violin. "Mr. Reynolds says this section needs work. I can't get the emotional tone right." Richard set down his briefcase and loosened his tie. Normally, he would retreat to his study with a glass of scotch, but something made him linger. "What does getting the emotional tone right mean for this piece?" he asked, genuinely curious. Lily's face brightened at his interest. "This part is when the heart breaks, but finds strength anyway. Mr. Reynolds says I play the heartbreak perfectly, but miss the strength." Richard blinked, surprised by her articulation. "That's quite an analysis for someone your age." Lily shrugged. "Music is just feelings made into sound. I understand feelings." "Do you?" Richard sat down, finding himself drawn into conversation with this peculiar child. "What feelings does this penthouse give you?" Lily considered the question seriously. "It feels lonely, beautiful but empty, like a museum after closing time." Richard barked a surprised laugh. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured. "You're not wrong." "Why do you live alone in such a big place?" Lily asked, emboldened by his response. Richard's face closed slightly. "That's a complicated adult question." "I'm good at complicated," Lily said simply. "I've had a complicated life." Something in her earnest expression broke through Richard's usual reserve. "I was married once," he said quietly. "Elizabeth. She loved music too, classical piano. We were going to have children, fill this place with noise and life. She died of cancer 12 years ago. After that, I just focused on work." Lily absorbed this information silently, then lifted her violin again. Instead of the Tchaikovsky, she began playing a gentle, healing melody that Richard had never heard before. "What's that piece?" he asked, when she finished. "I just made it up," she said. "It's how your story felt to me." That night marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Richard began coming home earlier, sometimes just to listen to Lily practice. He installed a proper music room with perfect acoustics. Occasionally, he even shared meals with her, gradually learning how to converse with a child whose perspective on life defied her years. February brought Lily's first public performance, a small student recital at the conservatory where Michael taught. Richard found himself unaccountably nervous as he sat in the audience, watching Lily make her way to center stage, her crutches exchanged for a sleek, lightweight wheelchair that allowed her greater mobility. When she played, the audience of parents, teachers, and students fell into stunned silence. Michael had wisely selected a piece that showcased her emotional range rather than just technical brilliance. Dvorak's Songs My Mother Taught Me, arranged for violin. The poignancy of the piece, performed by an orphaned child, left few dry eyes in the room. Afterward, as Richard awkwardly fielded compliments from other parents, he felt a strange new emotion he eventually identified as pride. Not pride of ownership or investment, but genuine pride in Lily's accomplishment. "Your daughter is extraordinary," one mother gushed. Richard opened his mouth to correct her, then simply said, "Yes, she is." That night, as the chauffeur drove them home, Lily asked a question that had been forming since the recital. "Richard, why did you really help me? Was it just because I can play well?" Richard gazed out at the passing streetlights, considering his answer carefully. "At first, yes," he admitted. "I recognized a valuable talent worth developing. But now—" He paused, surprising himself with his realization. "Now I'm helping because I want to see who you'll become. Talent aside." Lily nodded, satisfied with his honesty. "I think Mrs. Elizabeth would be happy you're not so alone anymore." Richard's throat tightened unexpectedly. Perhaps she would. But as the car pulled up to their building, Richard couldn't shake the nagging awareness that their arrangement remained temporary. Sooner or later, questions about Lily's permanent placement would need to be addressed, and for the first time in years, the thought of his empty penthouse returning to silence filled him with dread. Spring arrived in Boston, melting snow and bringing tentative green to the public garden. Lily's progress accelerated beyond even Michael's ambitious expectations. Her physical therapy showed modest improvements too. Though doctors confirmed she would never walk without assistance, her upper body strength increased, and she became adept at maneuvering her wheelchair independently. One particularly significant development was Lily's growing friendship with Emma Carter. Richard had arranged for Emma to visit the penthouse on weekends, recognizing Lily's need for companionship her own age. Initially awkward amid the luxury, 11-year-old Emma soon became a regular fixture, her practical nature and protective instincts providing a grounding influence for Lily. "You need to get out more," Emma declared on a sunny April afternoon as they sat in Richard's kitchen. "All you do is practice and study." "I go to physical therapy," Lily countered, reaching for an apple from the fruit bowl. Such casual abundance still amazed her. Food always available, no need to compete or save portions for later. Emma rolled her eyes. "That's not fun. When's the last time you went to a park or a movie or anywhere kids actually go?" "Mister, Reynolds says great musicians must be disciplined. You're 7, not 70. Emma's exasperation was tempered with affection. Even Mozart probably played tag sometimes. This conversation planted a seed. Later that week, Lily cautiously approached Richard as he reviewed documents at the dining table. "Richard," she began, fingers nervously tracing the wheelchair's armrest, "could we maybe go somewhere this weekend? Somewhere normal children go?" Richard looked up, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Such as the Children's Museum? Or the aquarium? Emma says it has ramps everywhere." Richard's immediate instinct was to delegate, hire a suitable companion to take her, but something in her hopeful expression stopped him. "I suppose I could move some appointments," he said, surprising himself. "Saturday afternoon." The New England Aquarium on a Saturday proved to be an education for Richard. Navigating crowds with a child in a wheelchair required patience he rarely exercised in business. He found himself fiercely protective, glaring at anyone who blocked Lily's view of the exhibits. "The penguins are my favorite," Lily declared, eyes wide as the birds porpoised through water. "They can't fly, but they found another way to be amazing." Richard caught the unintentional parallel and smiled. Adaptation is a powerful thing. As they paused before the giant ocean tank, Richard's phone buzzed with a call he'd been anticipating, the Tokyo market opening with news about a major acquisition. "I need to take this," he said automatically, reaching for his phone. But Lily's face had lit up, watching a sea turtle glide majestically past the glass, her expression so transported that Richard hesitated. The call buzzed again. With a decisive movement, he silenced the phone and returned it to his pocket. "Tell me about sea turtles," he said instead. "Have you studied them? Have you—" Lily launched into facts she'd learned from the orphanage's donated encyclopedia set, her enthusiasm infectious. Richard found himself genuinely engaged, the acquisition momentarily forgotten. Later, as they shared ice cream despite the spring chill, Richard received a text from Sarah Williams, the music therapist who had first spotted Lily's talent. She had secured Lily an audition with the prestigious Youth Symphony Orchestra, an almost unheard-of opportunity for someone so young. "Would you like to play with other musicians?" Richard asked, showing Lily the message. Lily's spoon paused midway to her mouth. "With an orchestra, real musicians. Very real. Very talented young musicians." Fear flashed across her face. "What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm different?" Richard considered her concern thoughtfully. "You are different, Lily. But not because of your wheelchair or your circumstances. You're different because when you play, you speak a language most people spend lifetimes trying to master." Lily absorbed this, then asked quietly, "Did Mrs. Elizabeth speak that language too?" Richard was startled by the question. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, she did. How did you know?" "You get a special look when you listen to certain pieces, like you're hearing someone's voice." Richard felt unexpectedly exposed. "You're remarkably perceptive." The audition was scheduled for May. As it approached, Lily's practice intensified, and Richard found himself increasingly invested in her preparation. He attended her lessons with Michael, learned about the piece she would perform, even researched the history of the Youth Symphony. The night before the audition, Richard heard soft crying from Lily's room during his customary check before bed. He found her clutching a worn photograph. Her parents, he realized with a pang. "They won't be there tomorrow," she whispered when she saw him, "for the biggest day." Richard sat carefully on the edge of her bed. "No," he agreed, not offering empty platitudes. "They won't be physically present, but I believe they would be enormously proud of you." "Will you be there?" Lily asked, vulnerability naked in her voice. "Front row," Richard promised. "Nothing could keep me away." It was only after returning to his own room that Richard realized the Tokyo acquisition would finalize during Lily's audition. A year ago, he would have considered the question of priorities absurd. Business always came first. Now, he didn't hesitate. He called his executive team and rearranged everything. Some investments, he was learning, yielded returns that couldn't be measured in dollars. The day of the Youth Symphony audition dawned bright and clear. Richard had expected Lily to be nervous, but she displayed a focused calm that professional performers would envy. She wore a new dress, midnight blue with silver accents that complemented the elegant wheelchair Richard had specially ordered for performances. "You look like a concert soloist," he told her as they prepared to leave. Lily smiled, adjusting her violin case on her lap. "Music is the only time I forget about my legs. When I play, I can run and dance and fly." The Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra held its auditions in the historic Jordan Hall at the New England Conservatory. Richard wheeled Lily through the ornate entrance, conscious of the curious glances from other parents and children. Most of the auditioning musicians were at least twice Lily's age, their parents hovering anxiously nearby. Michael Reynolds met them in the lobby. "There's been a slight change," he informed them, looking unusually tense. "The regular audition panel has been supplemented today. Maestro Abramovich is visiting from the Boston Symphony Orchestra and has asked to sit in." Richard noticed Lily's fingers tighten around her violin case. "Is that significant?" he asked. Michael gave him a look that suggested Richard had asked if water was wet. Valentin Abramovich is one of the most respected conductors in the world. He never attends youth auditions, ever. Lily looked up, her composure wavering for the first time. Why would he come to mine? Word has spread about your playing, Michael said simply. The musical community is curious. As they waited for Lily's turn, Richard felt a strange protectiveness surge within him. These past months had transformed their relationship from benefactor and beneficiary into something he couldn't quite define. Not quite father and daughter, but more than guardian and ward. "Lily Morgan," called the audition coordinator. Richard squeezed her shoulder gently. "Remember what we discussed. Play for yourself, not for them." Inside the auditorium, 5 people sat in the otherwise empty audience. 4 regular judges and a distinguished-looking man with steel-grey hair whom Richard assumed was Abramovich. Richard took a seat at the back, as parents weren't permitted to sit with the panel. Lily positioned herself center stage, the spotlight catching the silver wheels of her chair. If the judges were surprised by her age or disability, they maintained professional neutrality. "Ms. Morgan," the head judge began, "please perform your prepared piece." Lily nodded and raised her violin. She had chosen Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, a piece of such emotional intensity that many adult violinists avoided its challenges. The first notes filled the hall, perfectly pitched and phrased. Richard watched as the judges' expressions shifted from polite attention to focused interest. By the midpoint of the piece, Abramovich had leaned forward in his seat, eyes narrowed in concentration. Lily played as if she had lived through the sorrows and hopes of centuries, her small body swaying slightly with the music's flow. The piece's famous crescendo built to its peak, her bow moving with astonishing control, before descending into the gentle resolution that left the hall in reverent silence. For several moments after she finished, no one spoke. Then Abramovich stood. "Young lady," he said, his Russian accent prominent. "How old are you?" 7 years and 8 months, sir," Lily answered. "And how long have you studied violin?" "I found one when I was 4, sir, but I've had proper lessons for only a few months." Abramovich exchanged glances with the other judges. "Would you wait outside with your father for a moment?" Richard felt a strange tightness in his chest at being mistaken for Lily's father, but he didn't correct the assumption. He followed Lily out to the hallway where they waited in tense silence. After what seemed an eternity, Michael emerged from the auditorium, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Richard demanded. "They're offering her a position," Michael said, a smile finally breaking through. "Not just in the youth symphony, but as a featured soloist for their winter concert." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? That's not all," Michael continued. "Maestro Abramovich wants to include you in the Boston Symphony's educational outreach program. It would mean performing in schools throughout Massachusetts, representing classical music to children your age." Richard knelt beside Lily's wheelchair. "This is extraordinary," he said softly. "Are you pleased?" Lily nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "Can I play for children like me, at the hospital and the orphanage too?" "I'm certain that can be arranged," Richard replied, struck by her first thought being of others. That evening, they celebrated at Lily's favorite restaurant, a casual pizza place that Richard would never have entered before Lily came into his life. As they shared a pepperoni pizza, Richard received an email that the Tokyo acquisition had completed successfully, adding millions to his company's value. He realized, with some surprise, that the news felt secondary to Lily's achievement. "Richard," Lily asked, noticing his distraction, "is something wrong?" "Not at all," he answered truthfully. "I'm just thinking about priorities." As they drove home, Lily fell asleep in the car, exhausted from the day's emotions. Carrying her to her room, Richard found himself contemplating a future he hadn't previously allowed himself to imagine, one where his life contained more than business deals and empty achievements. He carefully tucked Lily into bed, placing her beloved violin case within reach, as she always preferred. On her nightstand sat the photograph of her parents, alongside a new picture, Lily and Richard at the aquarium, both smiling. "Sleep well, little musician," he whispered. But as Richard turned to leave, he failed to notice the envelope that had been slipped under his door earlier that day. Inside was a letter that would soon challenge everything they had built together. A letter from someone claiming to be Lily's blood relative, someone with legal rights no temporary guardianship could override. Richard's morning routine had evolved since Lily entered his life. Before checking markets or emails, he now visited her room, listening for the gentle breathing that had become the rhythm underlying his days. This morning, however, his thoughts were consumed by the letter he'd discovered after returning from her triumph with the Youth Symphony. The envelope, plain and unmarked, contained a single typed page. "Mr. Blackwell, I am Jacob Morgan, brother of David Morgan, Lily's father. I have recently learned of my niece's whereabouts and musical accomplishments. As her only living blood relative, I intend to file for permanent custody. My lawyer will contact you shortly. Please understand this isn't personal. Family should be with family." Richard's hands had trembled as he read it. In just 6 months, Lily had transformed from an investment in musical talent to what? He couldn't articulate the relationship precisely, only that the thought of losing her created a physical ache he hadn't experienced since Elizabeth's death. "Richard, are you okay?" Lily's voice interrupted his thoughts. She had wheeled herself into the kitchen, already dressed for her lesson with Michael. "Perfect timing," he said, forcing brightness into his voice. "I was just about to make breakfast." "You're holding a coffee pot over your cereal," Lily observed. Richard glanced down, embarrassed. "Distracted, I suppose. Big day at the office." Lily studied him with that unsettling perceptiveness. "You're not telling me something." Richard sighed, setting down the coffee pot. At 53, he'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less anxiety than this conversation. "Lily, do you remember your father having a brother?" She frowned. "I don't think so. Dad never mentioned one." "None at all? Perhaps estranged or living far away?" "Why are you asking?" Her small fingers tightened around the wheelchair's arms. Richard knelt beside her, decision made. "Someone claiming to be your uncle has contacted me. He's seeking custody." Lily's face paled. "I don't have an uncle. It's just been Mrs. Peterson and the orphanage since the accident. We'll sort this out," Richard promised, squeezing her hand. "Nothing will change right now. Your recital with the Youth Symphony is next week, and that remains our priority." But change was already seeping into their carefully constructed world. That afternoon, Richard's lawyer confirmed that Jacob Morgan had indeed filed preliminary custody papers, claiming he'd been searching for Lily since learning of his brother's death, but had been hindered by miscommunication with child services. "What are his chances?" Richard demanded. "Blood relatives typically receive strong consideration," his lawyer explained. "Your temporary guardianship was always meant to be just that, temporary." That evening, Richard found Lily practicing with unusual intensity, her bow attacking the strings with almost desperate energy. "Mr. Reynolds says my crescendos lack conviction," she explained without stopping. Richard recognized the displacement activity for what it was. "Lily, we need to discuss this situation." She lowered her bow reluctantly. "I don't want to leave." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. "I don't want that either," Richard admitted. "But there will be legal proceedings, evaluations. It may get complicated." "Because he's blood and you're not?" Lily's direct question struck him like a physical blow. "Essentially, yes." Lily's chin lifted in that determined gesture Richard had come to admire. Then we'll just have to prove that family isn't only about blood. The next morning brought another development, a request for Lily to perform at a prestigious benefit concert for children's medical research. The invitation came from Dr. Williams, who had maintained contact since their first meeting. This would place Lily alongside professional musicians, Richard told Michael during their weekly progress meeting. Is she ready? Technically, absolutely, Michael confirmed. Emotionally, with this custody situation, it could be a lot of pressure. I want to do it, Lily interjected from where she'd been practicing scales. For children like me. As preparations for both the recital and benefit concert intensified, a private investigator hired by Richard uncovered troubling information about Jacob Morgan. He had a history of financial difficulties and had recently been seeking representation for an extraordinarily talented young relative with several music management agencies. He may be more interested in Lily's earning potential than her welfare, the investigator suggested. Richard felt sick at the thought of Lily being exploited, yet the courts would require substantial evidence before discounting a blood relative's claim. The night before the Youth Symphony recital, Lily knocked on the door of Richard's home office, where he sat surrounded by legal documents. "Can I talk to you about something important?" she asked, wheeling herself in without waiting for a response. "Of course." Richard set aside his papers. "If this man is really my uncle, shouldn't I meet him before the judge decides anything?" Richard considered this. "That would be reasonable, yes." "Then I want to invite him to my recital tomorrow," Lily stated firmly. "I want him to see me play, and I want to see his reaction." Richard studied her, marveling at the wisdom behind the request. "You want to test whether he appreciates your music or just sees dollar signs?" Lily nodded. "Music never lies. When I play, I'll know the truth about him, and so will you." The recital hall buzzed with anticipation. At Richard's insistence, the event organizers had installed accessible ramps to the stage, ensuring Lily could make her entrance with dignity. Backstage, she sat quietly in her performance wheelchair, violin across her lap, eyes closed in concentration. Richard approached carefully, not wanting to disrupt her preparation. "He's here," he said softly. "Third row, left side, navy blue suit." Lily opened her eyes. "What does he look like?" "There's some family resemblance," Richard acknowledged reluctantly. "Same chin, similar eyes to your father's photo." Something flickered across Lily's face. Hope, curiosity, or perhaps fear. Richard couldn't tell. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lily nodded, straightening her posture. "Remember our agreement. Watch him during the Sibelius piece. That's when I'll be speaking directly to him." The Youth Symphony's performance began with a Beethoven overture, the young musicians playing with technical proficiency, if not emotional depth. When it came time for Lily's solo piece, Sibelius's violin concerto in D minor, the audience settled into attentive silence. Lily rolled herself to center stage, positioning her wheelchair precisely as she'd practiced. Without fanfare, she lifted her violin and began. Richard divided his attention between Lily's performance and Jacob Morgan's reaction. The first movement was technically demanding, showcasing Lily's extraordinary dexterity. Morgan leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing in what appeared to be calculation rather than appreciation. The second movement began, achingly beautiful, filled with longing. Lily swayed slightly as she played, her expression transported. Richard noticed Morgan checking his watch, then making a note on his phone. By the fiery final movement, Richard had seen enough. Jacob Morgan was watching a commodity, not a child. His eyes never softened, his expression remained evaluative rather than moved. When the audience erupted in a standing ovation, Morgan applauded perfunctorily while scanning the crowd, seemingly assessing the market value of their enthusiasm. Backstage after the performance, Lily was surrounded by well-wishers. Richard hovered nearby, maintaining a protective distance while allowing her moment of triumph. "She's remarkable," said a voice beside him. Jacob Morgan had somehow bypassed security. "I'm glad to see my niece has been well trained." Richard turned slowly, controlling his instinctive dislike. "Mr. Morgan, I'm Richard Blackwell." "I know who you are." Morgan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I appreciate you stepping in temporarily, but it's time Lily was with family." "That's for the courts to decide." "Blood usually wins these cases," Morgan replied confidently, "especially when the alternative is a busy executive with no parenting experience." Before Richard could respond, he felt a tug on his jacket. Emma Carter had appeared at his side. "Lily's asking for you," she said, eyeing Morgan suspiciously. "She won't leave without you." Richard nodded to Morgan. "Excuse me, duty calls." He found Lily surrounded by her fellow musicians, accepting their congratulations with quiet grace. When she saw him, her face brightened. "Did you see?" she asked. Richard knelt beside her wheelchair. "I saw everything," he confirmed quietly, "including him." Her smile faltered. "He didn't feel the music, did he?" "No," Richard answered honestly. "He didn't." The legal proceedings intensified over the following weeks. Jacob Morgan presented himself as a concerned uncle, eager to provide Lily with a normal family environment rather than the isolated luxury of Richard's penthouse. His lawyers emphasized blood ties and subtly questioned Richard's motives. Richard's team countered with evidence of Lily's progress under his guardianship, expert testimony from Michael and Dr. Williams, and carefully documented instances of Morgan's apparent financial motivations. Through it all, Lily continued practicing for the benefit concert, channeling her anxiety into her music. Richard found himself alternating between strategy sessions with lawyers and sitting quietly in the music room, drawing unexpected peace from Lily's playing. "If we lose," Lily asked one evening, setting down her bow, "will I still get to play?" Richard chose his words carefully. "I believe your uncle sees your talent as valuable, yes." "That's not what I asked," Lily persisted. "Will I get to play for the joy of it, not just for money or fame?" Richard had no answer that wouldn't be a lie. The night before the benefit concert, Richard received troubling news. His investigator had discovered that Jacob Morgan had already signed a preliminary contract with a management agency specializing in child prodigies. One with a questionable reputation for prioritizing profit over performer well-being. "We need to present this to the judge," Richard's lawyer advised. "It clearly demonstrates his intentions." After tomorrow's concert, Richard decided, Lily needs to focus on her performance now. What he didn't say was that he feared the concert might be their last shared milestone if the court ruled in Morgan's favor. Despite all logic, despite his years of emotional detachment, Richard had allowed himself to imagine a future with Lily as a permanent part of his life. Now that future hung in the balance, dependent on a judge's interpretation of what constituted a child's best interest, blood ties or emotional bonds. The benefit concert was held in the grand ballroom of Boston's Fairmont Copley Plaza, transformed for the evening into an elegant concert venue. The event had attracted Boston's elite, all paying handsomely to support children's medical research while enjoying performances from established musicians and promising newcomers. Lily was scheduled to perform second to last, just before the Boston Symphony Orchestra's closing piece. As Richard helped her prepare backstage, he noticed her unusual quietness. "Nervous?" he asked, adjusting the midnight blue bow in her hair that matched her performance dress. "No," she replied, but her fingers trembled slightly as she tuned her violin. Richard knelt to eye level. "What is it then?" Lily met his gaze directly. "What if this is our last concert together?" The question pierced Richard more deeply than he'd expected. The hearing isn't until next week. We still have time. But after that? Lily persisted. If the judge chooses him, will I still see you? Richard had asked his lawyers this very question. The answer had been discouraging. If Morgan gained custody and chose to restrict access, Richard would have limited recourse. I will always be part of your life, Richard promised, sidestepping the legal realities. No matter what. From the wings, they watched the other performances. Jacob Morgan sat prominently in the front row, accompanied by a sharp-featured woman Richard recognized as an agent from the management company his investigator had identified. He brought her to hear me play, Lily whispered, having spotted them too. Not because he loves music, but because I'm a business opportunity. Richard squeezed her shoulder gently. Focus on the music, not the audience. When Lily's turn came, Richard wheeled her to center stage, then retreated to the wings. She had chosen Massenet's Meditation from Thais, a piece of extraordinary emotional depth that showcased her interpretive abilities more than technical fireworks. The opening notes floated across the ballroom, delicate and questioning. Richard watched as the audience collectively leaned forward, drawn in by the vulnerable beauty of Lily's playing. Even the waitstaff paused their duties, transfixed. Halfway through the piece, something changed. Lily's bow faltered, producing a harsh sound that drew confused murmurs from the audience. She recovered quickly, but Richard could see her struggling, her body suddenly tense. When she reached the climax of the piece, where the melody should have soared with transcendent emotion, Lily's playing became mechanical, technically correct, but emotionally vacant. As the final notes faded, the applause was polite but confused. Richard hurried to Lily as she exited the stage, alarmed by her pallor. "What happened?" he asked, leading her to a quiet corner backstage. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "I couldn't feel the music anymore. I kept seeing him and that woman watching me like I'm not even a person, just a thing they can use." Richard's heart clenched. The pressure of the custody battle was affecting her profoundly, undermining the very gift that had brought them together. "I'm so sorry," he said, drawing her into a gentle embrace. "This isn't fair to you." "I don't want to be a business," Lily whispered against his shoulder. "I just want to play, because it's the voice my heart doesn't have words for." Richard made a decision in that moment, one that his former self would have considered madness. If protecting Lily's spirit meant sacrificing her career as a prodigy, so be it. Her well-being mattered more than her talent, her happiness more than her potential earnings. Later that evening, as they drove home in uncharacteristic silence, Richard received a call from his lawyer. "Morgan's team has requested an emergency hearing," she explained. "They're citing tonight's performance as evidence that Lily is suffering emotional distress under your care." Richard glanced at Lily, who had fallen asleep in the car, her small face troubled even in slumber. "He's using her natural reaction to his exploitation against us," Richard realized, anger rising in his chest. "The judge has agreed to hear arguments day after tomorrow," his lawyer continued. "We need to prepare." After hanging up, Richard sat in the darkened car, his resolve hardening. He had built his fortune by outmaneuvering opponents, anticipating their strategies, and striking decisively when opportunity arose. Now he would apply those same skills to the most important battle of his life. The next morning, Richard made 2 critical phone calls. The first was to Sarah Williams at Boston Children's Hospital. "I need your professional opinion on the record," he explained, "about the impact of commercial exploitation on a child musician's emotional development." His second call was to Michael Reynolds. "If the court rules against us," Richard said without preamble, "I need you to continue teaching Lily regardless of who's paying. Be our eyes and ears. Make sure she's okay." Michael's response was immediate. "You have my word. But Richard, don't give up yet. That afternoon, Richard sat Lily down for the hardest conversation of their time together. "Tomorrow's hearing is very important," he began carefully. "The judge will probably want to speak with you privately." Lily nodded solemnly. "To ask where I want to live?" "Yes, and I need you to understand something." Richard paused, choosing his words with precision. "No matter what happens, your music belongs to you, not to me, not to your uncle. If playing makes you happy, play. If it doesn't, you can stop. Your value isn't in your violin, Lily. It's in who you are." Lily studied him, her gaze unnervingly direct. "You really mean that, don't you?" "With all my heart. Even though my playing is what made you notice me, what made you bring me here." Richard smiled sadly. "That's how our story began, yes. But it's not why I'm fighting to keep you with me now." The family court occupied the fourth floor of a downtown government building, all fluorescent lighting and worn linoleum, worlds away from the luxurious spaces Lily had grown accustomed to. Richard had dressed conservatively, wanting to project stability rather than wealth. Lily wore a simple blue dress, her violin case beside her wheelchair, though no one had asked her to bring it. Judge Marion Winters was a formidable woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes that missed nothing. She began by establishing ground rules. "This is not a trial, but a hearing to determine the best interests of the child," she stated. "I'll hear from both parties, relevant witnesses, and then speak with Lily privately." Jacob Morgan presented first, his attorney painting him as the devoted uncle who had searched tirelessly for his niece. "Blood ties matter," Morgan testified, his voice breaking with well-rehearsed emotion. "My brother would have wanted Lily with family, not a stranger who views her as an investment." Richard stiffened at the characterization, but remained silent as instructed by his lawyer. When Morgan's team presented video of Lily's faltering performance at the benefit concert, Judge Winters leaned forward. "And what conclusion should I draw from this?" she asked. "That the pressure of living with Mr. Blackwell, a busy executive with no childcare experience, is causing Lily emotional distress," Morgan's lawyer explained. "She needs stability, not exploitation." When Richard's turn came, his lawyer called Dr. Williams to testify first. "In your professional opinion," she asked, "what caused Lily's difficulty during that performance?" "Acute anxiety," Dr. Williams answered confidently, "but not from Mr. Blackwell's guardianship. My observations suggest Lily was responding to perceived pressure from elsewhere." "Could you elaborate?" Dr. Williams gestured toward Morgan. "Lily became aware that certain parties were viewing her performance through a commercial lens rather than an artistic one. For a sensitive child whose music is deeply personal, that's profoundly distressing." Next, Richard's lawyer presented the evidence of Morgan's contract with the management agency, highlighting clauses about performance frequency and profit percentages. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her questions grew increasingly pointed. Finally, Richard took the stand. Rather than the rehearsed statement his lawyers had prepared, he spoke directly from the heart. "Your Honor, 6 months ago I met a child playing violin on a street corner. I saw talent worth developing. I didn't expect to find someone who would change how I see the world." He described their evolving relationship, the awkward beginning, the growing trust, the moments of connection through music and beyond. "I won't pretend I know everything about being a parent," Richard admitted. "I'm learning every day. But I know this: Lily isn't a business opportunity to me. She's a child who deserves to develop her gift joyfully, not under commercial pressure." He paused, gathering himself. "If Your Honor determines that living with her uncle is truly in Lily's best interest, I'll respect that decision. But I'm asking you to look beyond blood ties to what will nurture both Lily's exceptional talent and her heart." Judge Winters nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to speak with Lily now. Everyone except Ms. Carter will please step outside. Emma had been included as a character witness, having known Lily longest. Richard squeezed Lily's hand before leaving. Just be honest, he whispered. The wait in the hallway seemed eternal. Richard paced while Jacob Morgan sat stiffly on a bench, pointedly avoiding conversation. Inside the judge's chambers, Lily faced the most important interview of her young life. Lily, Judge Winters began gently, I'd like you to tell me, in your own words, about living with Mr. Blackwell. Lily considered carefully. At first it was strange. His apartment was so quiet and perfect, like no one really lived there, and he didn't know what to do with a kid. And now? Now it feels like home, Lily said simply. Richard listens when I play. Really listens. Not just to how good I am, but to what I'm saying with the music. And what about your uncle? Lily's expression clouded. He says he's my father's brother, but Dad never mentioned him, and when I played for him, he was checking his phone and looking at the audience instead of hearing me. If you could choose where to live, what would you decide? Lily didn't hesitate. With Richard. He promised I could stop playing violin tomorrow if I wanted to, and he'd still want me around. No one ever said that before. After nearly an hour, they emerged. The judge announced she would review all evidence and deliver her decision the following morning. That night, Richard and Lily sat in comfortable silence in the music room. For once, Lily wasn't practicing. Whatever happens tomorrow, Richard said finally, I want you to know these months have been the most meaningful of my life. Lily nodded, a wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. Mine too. Morning brought unwelcome news. Despite the evidence and testimony, Judge Winters had ruled in favor of blood relation, granting Jacob Morgan full custody with a 2-week transition period. Richard's lawyer was already preparing an appeal, but the process would take months, with no guarantee of success. We lost, Lily whispered when Richard explained, her small face crumpling. The first round, Richard corrected, maintaining a calm he didn't feel. We're not giving up. The transition period began with supervised visits between Lily and Jacob Morgan. Richard insisted these take place at the penthouse, wanting Lily to have the security of familiar surroundings. During the first visit, Morgan arrived with the agent Richard had seen at the benefit concert. Her business cards identified her as Veronica Sheldon of Prodigy Management. Ms. Sheldon is excited about Lily's future, Morgan explained as they sat awkwardly in Richard's living room. She's already fielding offers for concerts and appearances. Richard noticed Lily's fingers tightening around her wheelchair's armrests. I've committed to performing with the Youth Symphony through their winter season, Lily said quietly. And the Children's Hospital program. Morgan waved dismissively. We'll evaluate those commitments. There may be more advantageous opportunities. Advantageous for whom? Richard couldn't help asking. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Morgan outlined his vision for Lily's career, a schedule of performances, competitions, and media appearances that would leave little time for normal childhood activities. What about school? Lily asked. Private tutoring, of course, Sheldon interjected, far more efficient than traditional education. And my friends. Emma visits on weekends. Morgan's expression tightened. We'll be relocating to New York. That's where the real opportunities are. After they left, Lily retreated to her room, refusing even to practice. Richard found her staring out the window, violin case untouched beside her. He doesn't care what I want, she said when Richard entered. I'm just a ticket to him. Richard sat beside her. The appeal process has begun, and I've spoken with Dr. Williams about testifying more strongly about your emotional welfare. But that could take forever, Lily whispered. What if I have to go with him next week? Richard had been asking himself the same question. Their legal options were limited, the appeal process frustratingly slow. If Morgan gained physical custody, he could immediately relocate Lily to New York, making further legal challenges even more difficult. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Richard received an unexpected call from Emma Carter. "Mr. Blackwell?" Her young voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "I need to tell you something about Lily." "Is she all right?" Richard asked, immediately concerned. "Yes, but she has a plan. She made me promise not to tell, but I'm worried." Emma explained that Lily intended to use her final scheduled performance with the Youth Symphony to make a public statement about her situation, hoping to sway public opinion and perhaps influence the legal proceedings. "She's going to play something she wrote herself," Emma continued, "something about how she feels. She says if enough people hear it, maybe the judge will listen too." Richard was both moved by Lily's determination and concerned about the potential consequences. "Thank you for telling me, Emma. I'll handle this carefully." The next morning, Richard found Michael Reynolds already working with Lily in the music room. "Michael mentioned you're composing a piece," Richard said casually after the lesson. "May I hear it?" Lily shot Michael an accusing look. "It's not ready yet." "Emma told me," Richard admitted. "She's worried about you." Lily's shoulders slumped. "It was supposed to be a surprise." "I'm not going to stop you," Richard said, sitting beside her. "But I want to understand what you're hoping to accomplish." Lily raised her chin with that familiar determination. "When I play, people listen, really listen. If I play what I'm feeling, about being taken away from where I belong, about being treated like a thing instead of a person, maybe someone will help us." Richard felt a surge of pride at her resilience. "May I make a suggestion? Something that might give your plan a better chance of success." Together with Michael, they refined Lily's composition, a haunting piece that began with discord and uncertainty before resolving into a melody of such hope and longing that even in its rough form, it brought tears to Richard's eyes. "There's one more thing we need," Richard said when they finished, "the right audience." Through Sarah Williams, Richard arranged for reporters from several arts publications to attend the Youth Symphony performance. He also invited Judge Winters, explaining that seeing Lily in her element might provide additional context for the appeal. The night before the performance, Morgan brought Veronica Sheldon to another supervised visit, this time with contracts for Lily to sign. "Just preliminary agreements," Sheldon explained smoothly. "Standard representation terms." Richard intervened. "No contracts will be signed during the transition period. That's explicitly stated in the judge's order." Morgan's facade of pleasantness slipped. "You've lost, Blackwell. Stop interfering with my niece's future." "Your niece?" Richard challenged. "Or your meal ticket?" After they left, Richard found Lily in the music room, practicing her composition with renewed intensity. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "There's no guarantee it will change anything legally." Lily nodded without stopping her playing. "Even if it doesn't work, I need to try. I need to speak in the only way I know how." Richard watched her, this remarkable child who had crashed into his ordered existence and transformed it entirely. In just 6 months, she had taught him more about courage, resilience, and authentic expression than he had learned in 53 years. Whatever happened tomorrow, he realized, Lily had already given him an invaluable gift. She had reminded him how to feel. The Youth Symphony's final performance of the season had sold out weeks in advance. Richard had secured front-row seats for Judge Winters, who had accepted the invitation with professional curiosity. Jacob Morgan sat several rows behind with Veronica Sheldon, unaware of what Lily planned. Backstage, Richard helped Lily prepare, noticing her unusual calm. "Nervous?" he asked, straightening her midnight blue concert dress. Lily shook her head. "When it's important enough, the fear goes away." Richard knelt beside her wheelchair. No matter what happens out there or in the appeal, I want you to know I'm incredibly proud of you. Not because of how you play, but because of who you are." "I know," Lily said simply, the certainty in her voice humbling him. The concert began with standard repertoire, the young musicians performing admirably. When it came time for Lily's solo, the program noted only "original composition by Lily Morgan." The conductor introduced her with evident pride. "In her short time with us, Lily Morgan has demonstrated not only extraordinary technical skill, but profound musical understanding. Tonight, she shares her own voice with a piece she has composed." Lily wheeled herself to center stage, positioning her violin. The audience fell silent, expectant. "Before I play," Lily said into the microphone, her clear voice carrying throughout the hall, "I want to explain what this music means. It's called Two Homes, one I lost when my parents died, and one I found when someone chose to hear me." Richard felt a lump form in his throat as Lily began to play. The piece opened with jagged, discordant notes that evoked loss and confusion. Gradually, a questioning melody emerged, searching and vulnerable. Then came a transition, halting at first, then building in confidence, as a new theme developed, warm and hopeful. The final movement intertwined both themes, the loss and the discovery, creating something wholly new. When the last note faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the audience erupted in applause. Richard glanced at Judge Winters, noting the tears she discreetly wiped away. Even Jacob Morgan appeared moved, though Veronica Sheldon was already typing notes on her phone. Backstage, after the performance, Lily was surrounded by well-wishers, including several music critics. Richard maintained a respectful distance until he noticed Judge Winters approaching. "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged, "that was enlightening." "Lily composed it entirely herself," Richard explained. "Music is how she processes her experiences." Judge Winters studied him. "I wondered if this invitation was a manipulation. Now I understand it was something else entirely." Before Richard could respond, Jacob Morgan pushed through the crowd. "Lily," he called, his voice overloud. "Incredible performance. Veronica already has 3 offers for you to perform that piece." As Morgan continued extolling the commercial possibilities, Richard watched Judge Winters observing the interaction, noting Lily's withdrawal, Morgan's focus on business opportunities, and the absence of genuine connection between supposed uncle and niece. The next morning, Richard received an unexpected call from Judge Winters herself. "In light of new observations," she explained formally, "I'm issuing a stay on the custody transfer pending full review. Lily will remain in your care during this process." Richard could hardly believe what he was hearing. "May I ask what prompted this?" There was a pause before Judge Winters spoke again, her tone less official. "Let's just say I recognized authentic communication when I heard it last night, and its absence in other interactions." 3 months later, after intensive investigation, the court made its final ruling. Jacob Morgan's claim of blood relationship proved tenuous at best. He was not David Morgan's brother, but a distant cousin who had discovered Lily's talent through news articles and engineered a custody claim for financial gain. Richard's petition for permanent guardianship was granted, with the option to pursue formal adoption. On a crisp autumn day, Richard and Lily sat in the public garden, watching leaves drift onto the pond's surface. Lily had just finished a practice session with Michael, working on a new original composition. "I had a thought," Richard said carefully. "If you're interested, we could make our arrangement more official. I could adopt you." Lily's fingers stilled on her violin case. "You mean I wouldn't just be your ward anymore?" "You'd be my daughter," Richard confirmed, surprising himself with how right the words felt, legally and in every other way. Lily considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Would I be Lily Blackwell then?" "If you wanted. Or you could keep Morgan to honor your parents." Lily Morgan Blackwell, she said experimentally. 2 homes in one name. Richard smiled, recognizing the reference to her composition. Perfect harmony. Lily extended her hand solemnly. I accept your offer, Mr. Blackwell. Richard laughed, taking her small hand in his. I think under the circumstances you might consider calling me Dad, if you want to. I'll practice, Lily promised, her eyes shining, just like my scales. As they made their way home through Boston's bustling streets, Richard reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together. 6 months ago, he had seen a business opportunity in a child playing violin on a street corner. Now he understood what he had really found. Not an investment, but a daughter. Not success, but family. And in teaching Lily to find her voice through music, she had taught him to hear his heart again.